you just got off tour, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so in a snapshot, how's tour?
Yeah, I mean, tour is crazy.
Really?
Yeah, so living on the road as an evangelist, a musical evangelist, it's been awesome. So, I mean, we're looking at 2.5 decades just about of doing that.
Man.
So I can honestly say that we literally went from Pensacola, Florida. We took, 10 across, doesn't go all the way across, but all the way to California. I mean, we hit places all the way between here and there.
Wow.
And then we went up California, San Francisco, Los Angeles, did all that. And then we went over to Utah, and then we went into Denver, and then we were in Boston. And oh, by the way, before we went to Boston, we actually came back to Pensacola because we had to take care of something. Got robbed while we were here. Dead serious. So we're sleeping, right? We have 2 days at home.
Yeah.
Sorry. We have 2 days at home. And while we're sleeping, someone decides to break into our car and steal a bunch of identification documents. So like passports and things like that. So, which has never happened in our neighborhood where we rent.
That's wild.
So yeah, so we're still like recovering from that. But then we went back on the road and went to Boston area and then over to Minnesota. And I mean, so it was crazy, literally crazy. And then the last stop was Nashville, Tennessee. And so there were all kinds of things going on. I'll give the cons first. We're having all kinds of vehicle trouble. We have a Ford Expedition. I loved my Ford Expedition for the first 2.5 years that I had it, which was 2020.
And then
in 2023, it just started having trouble, and it's been like an albatross. So the faithfulness of God has been proven because we'll break down, and my car, even now, it's actually at World Ford here in Pensacola. They haven't even seen it yet, and it's been there a month. So I'm driving around my son's 2005 Buick, and you know what? The air sometimes works, and I know this is like a really long answer to your short question.
No, you're good.
But it's like a reminder constantly of the fact that, hey, you know what? The Expedition has been working while we're traveling on the road. So here at home, I'm driving my son's car while they work on it. It's a brand new transmission that's going bad, so it's under warranty, so I'm not going to have to pay anything.
Nice.
It's just inconvenient. So this is a long way of saying on the con side of things, I've been constantly reminded over the last 4.5 months that anything great, anything good that we have comes from God, and it could always be worse. So it sounds horrible, but from the way that my brain works,
yeah,
I need to remember that because if I'm not careful, I can become a complainer, you know. And and how's that for our job is, and this is the pro side, we get to go to churches, and our whole goal is to encourage them in the Lord.
Yeah.
So if I have a critical spirit, it's not critical spirit, but like a complaining spirit in my heart, no one else may know. But I believe, and God could minister in spite of me, but I don't want him to minister in spite of me. I want him to minister through me. So that's probably, I threw my back out on this tour. Then I got better. My wife threw her back out. I hit for the first time ever. I actually had an accident where I backed into a fence that I didn't see. $1,000 worth of damage on our car. It was my fault. Like it was these things like just all stacked up. In such a way that a lot of people would say you had a horrible tour, but we actually didn't. We actually saw God move in special ways. We saw people rededicate their lives to the Lord. We saw so many people who are pressing onward for the Lord, and churches that are on fire. And I know that's a cliche that we've used for decades now, but churches that are alive, you know, and not just going through the motions. And we got to experience that and even be a small part of it, you know, and encouraging people. So that's a long answer to your short question, but it was a weird and wonderful tour. But we were glad when we got back.
Man. Just from times that I've traveled to relate to what you just said, it seems like when you're on stage in front of people a lot, that's when spiritual warfare seems to hit harder because the enemy knows that if he can get you feeling like a hypocrite in front of people.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a huge roadblock to just being able to be on stage conscience free and know, man, God, thank you put me here. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for this church. Thank you for this, as opposed to, is this really who I am? That's
That's an excellent observation, because sometimes, if I can take what you're saying and just extend it a little bit more, sometimes I will sing. All right, I got to back up a little bit. That hypocrisy feeling, I used to wrestle with it quite a bit, because, okay, here I am singing a song and I don't feel right about the song, or like I don't really feel or think what I'm singing right now. So what I've changed is I sing in order as a goal. So here's a song about surrender to the Lord, right? Okay, well, I don't feel very surrendered right now. I was just fussing with the Lord about this area of my life that I'm not satisfied with, right, or whatever. Well, then I sing this song, Surrender. By the time I'm done with that song, I'm asking the Lord, make me what this song is. And so that helps me, because I might start a song, I might sing Trust and Obey, an alternate tune to Trust and Obey, one of my favorite songs to start a week of meetings with. It's really simple. But my prayer is, and people may not realize it, but my prayer is, Lord, I may not feel like this right now, but by the end of this song, I want this to be genuine. So that helps me with that exact thing. I'm so glad you brought it up, because you're absolutely right, because we can feel that way. And maybe we were struggling the week before. And you're right. The devil puts targets, I think, on anyone who is leading others in worship, because the devil, whenever worship is involved, he likes to sniff around.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Can I drink water on the podcast?
Absolutely.
All right. On the vodcast. This is a vodcast? Vodcast?
I think it's still a podcast. I've actually never heard of vodcast before.
Yeah, I don't even know if I made it up or I heard it somewhere. I was like, video? Is it a
word.
vodcast? I don't know.
Oh, man. I suppose a good second question would be, you were mentioning a 50-year goal.
Yeah.
Do you want to walk through that goal? And you said
Sure.
you made an adjustment to it.
Yeah.
Like, what's it been like setting a big goal and working at it over a long-term period?
Well, what he's talking about is the fact that I specialize in a cappella music. So when I was about 5 or 6 years old, I got a gift of a little red cassette tape recorder from my grandmother. And I started recording into that, right? And in fact, my first job, if you would have asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? It would have been a radio host.
Yeah.
Because I just thought that was cool.
It's pretty cool, though.
Yeah. So I would record myself announcing songs coming on the radio and news reports. And a highlight of my life was when the local Christian radio guy, who was a friend of my dad's, he did my call sign for me. So, because I had a little broadcaster that would, like an FM broadcaster that would reach like half the house. That was it. It was run off a 9-volt battery.
Oh, man.
And I came up and it was 107.1, which is like way off on the dial, right? But that was like a highlight for me to have him say my call sign numbers. But anyway, long story somewhat shorter, I would come home from church. I would come home from school. I had the privilege to go to Christian school, so I'm learning these Christian songs and hymns and everything growing up, and I would sing those into the cassette recorder and then play them back, sing along with myself. Well, I did grow up in a musical home. Both my parents, professional musicians. I got a second cassette recorder, and I would record myself singing with myself. So it's not, I didn't invent this. Actually, Les and Mary Paul back in the early 60s, I think, they did it with reel-to-reels. That's not really my genre, but I do know it traces back to them. So other people have done this. Some people call it ping-ponging back and forth. But I started doing that, and that's how I learned how to sing harmony. And then as I got older, I would do quartets out of my own voice. And so I've been doing that now. Of course, I use computers, and I've been doing a cappella music for about 40 years. Well, nothing lasts forever. Our gifts that we have, some last longer than others. I'm called to preach, so I'll do that as long as I live, as whatever capacity the Lord allows. But our voice does age. And I've sung over 6,000 performances. You understand what I mean by that. It's not performance versus ministry. It's not one or the other. It can be both.
Yeah.
But over 6,000 times, and that takes a toll. So my voice is tired. I'm 47, actually tomorrow, And
Happy early birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I should be able to sing for a good long time.
Yeah.
But a cappella music takes a lot more out of you because you're layering every single voice and all the ranges. So I started realizing something last year that it was, the extreme ranges that I've been doing, particularly the high stuff, I'm probably not going to be able to do that a whole lot more. So let's make a goal. So last year I set a goal. I want to come up with 50 new a cappella recordings, not albums, but songs by the time I'm 50. So, and I started off doing that and it's gone pretty well. I live on the road and I've discovered something that it gets difficult to record on the road. I've done it all these years, but I've been in janitors' closets and, pastors' offices.
You're just finding wherever you can to record.
Exactly.
How on earth do you get a consistent acoustic space?
Well, first of all, I don't. So there are flaws. So if you're a perfectionist out there and you never publish anything because you wait for it to be perfect, I could have been there. I could have been me. But I read someone years ago that was like, listen, you get it to 90%. And then just get it out there. They did a study even recently of I think it was pottery students, and they
I know
you
what
heard
you're
this
talking
one?
about. Yeah,
and they had like for 30 days, one set of pottery students worked on one project, and then the same 30 days, a different set of pottery students had to do one project a day. And then they compared at the end of 30 days who was better. And so if you're familiar with this, it was the ones who did a daily project.
Yeah.
Then they were better than the ones that had spent 30 days on that. So I've adopted that. So you can hear in some of my a cappella music, you'll hear little things here and there that aren't perfect. You might hear a page turn that I forgot to get out. You might hear me clear my throat. There's these little flaws, and I don't sing every note correctly. I don't, for those of you music people who know what melodyne is, I do use it, but I don't melodyne to death. Like I leave flaws in. And we can get to that later on if you want, but because I got off track here. But I've just realized that I have a limited amount of time and a limited amount of resource. I'm pointing to my larynx here for those of you who are just audio. And it will run out at some point. So why not finish the a cappella stuff with a bang? And I've adjusted it slightly. So instead of saying 50 completely brand new recordings, I'm going to do 5 albums of 10 songs each. There's a few songs that I've already recorded prior to this project that I'm going to put on CD. Yeah. So I don't want anyone to accuse me, say I'm a liar or whatever. It'll probably end up being like 46 new songs or 44.
Now, does that include covers or no?
Yes. Okay. Yes. It's not original as in composition. Okay. It's new arrangements. Like I've got a new album. This will be the first anyone's heard of it. So your podcast will be I love it. Breaking news here. I have recorded my parts for 9 out of 10 songs for the actual next a cappella album. Okay. And none of the songs are original this album. That 10th song might end up being original. I'm not sure yet. So I'm debating on that. But these will be covers of I'm doing Behold Our God is one. Nice. There's one I'm super excited about. I'll tell you offline, but I don't want it public yet. Sure. Because someone will step out and do it in front of me. But I'm just excited. I'm doing some that are from this is going to show my age, but I'm doing one I've wanted to do my whole life, which is Cornerstone. I don't know if that rings a bell. It's an old Larnell Harris song. Jesus is the cornerstone. And it just was a classic when I was growing up. A little bit controversial in some places, but it's not anymore. But it's all covers. But then one of them, so there'll be 5 albums. So the first one was Acapella 5. Okay. Because it's my 5th all acapella album. And also, you're just getting all kinds of juice here. So I loved the group Glad. Okay. And they were actually, I didn't know this, they were a Christian rock band, but they did a cappella projects. I only knew their a cappella side. But they did like Be Glad, that was their theme song. the best arrangement ever of A Mighty Fortress.
Yeah.
A guy by the name of Bob Coughlin, who heads Sovereign Grace Music, or has,
Yeah.
he was the arranger for the group. So his a cappella arrangements, I grew up on that stuff. Well, they did 4 a cappella projects. They did more than that. But they titled 4 a cappella projects. So I called mine a cappella 5 because not only was it my 5th a cappella album, but I viewed myself as trying to continue the legacy.
Oh my word.
So no one knows that. So now you do, and whoever's listening.
That sounds really meaningful personally, though.
Oh, yes.
Oh man.
Right.
Because that's really what ushered you into it.
Right.
Right. So it's like you can feel like, hey, I added to this legacy in honor of what it did for me.
Yes. And you catch on really quick. I mean, we don't know each other. For those of you watching, listening, we actually just met in person today.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Today was the first time
we have talked and such.
I believe it or not, we actually met in person.
Oh, did I forget?
6 or 7 years ago.
Oh no, what did I do?
Yeah, I found you and I said, hey, I'm a junior, sophomore, whatever. Here's my SoundCloud.
Oh man,
I
never followed up. I'm so sorry.
No,
I
it's
try
totally
to follow
fine.
up.
Oh no,
I try to follow up.
Totally fine.
Oh man, do you still do SoundCloud?
I haven't posted on it in a while. My goal is to move to Spotify and do miscellaneous on SoundCloud, but
yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
Yeah, SoundCloud's just one of those things. Like there was an era for it, and every person I talked to, including myself, like I haven't done anything. I still have one, but I haven't done anything on it. Yeah, it is very personal, and in fact, my sound is, I don't want to say stuck, but it is definitely reflective of a certain era in a cappella music. It is not, you're not going to set my stuff up and compare it to pentatonics. It's not the same. It's not intended to be the same. I couldn't do what they do anyway. They're freaks of nature. They're talented. It's not going to be the same as a home free. And these are secular groups, obviously, but it's not even the same as, I'm not even actually familiar with a ton. I just realized I'm not familiar with a lot of the Christian a cappella groups that are out there currently, because all my stuff would have been from the 80s and then the 90s. But there's been like 3 resurgences of a cappella. We're talking a cappella now.
You're good,
you're waking the giant.
Go
man.
for it.
I love this topic, but there's been 3 kind of eras of a cappella music. Probably is 4, but as far as I'm concerned, there was a resurgence of a cappella music in the late 80s going into the 90s. And that's when you had Take 6. You had a group called A Cappella. Glad was part of that. In fact, there were other groups, and just so I don't want to get you in trouble or me in trouble. Just because I name a group doesn't mean I agree with everything they ever did, ever.
Absolutely.
Right. But this is just reality. There were other groups like, I just forgot their name, but in the Christian contemporary
Straight
world,
No Chaser?
that they would be part of the 3rd resurgence.
Okay.
And that's again, I'm not an official historian, but Straight No Chaser represents a collegiate style of a cappella. And that's very close to my heart. My technical term for what I do is studio a cappella.
Okay.
What I would say, your pentatonics, they do things that you can't do without computer. How do I say this? Because
like music production techniques?
Well, it's more, it was all the way back in the 50s and 60s when people started using a studio as an instrument. Like the studio isn't just there to capture the sound. It's actually part of creating the sound. Like,
Yeah.
And you with your studio background now and everything that you're doing, we were talking beforehand. It feels different being at your studio at work.
Yeah.
Than coming home and working on your studio at home, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That and it prompts certain different feelings and different products. So at risk of to keep myself from getting too far into the weeds, I am an analog thinking a cappella studio artist. So that feeling, because there was a group called the Singers Unlimited.
Okay.
And Singers Unlimited was the first group to use multi-tracking. They didn't invent it, but it was a girl and 3 guys. And if you look up Singers Unlimited, they were huge in the late 60s and going into the 70s. And they would layer like 25 voices. and everyone that came down, like Take Six, I'm saying all these names, not really Swingle Singers, but because they had a different start, actually over in Mobile, not too far away from here, but so many of the modern a cappella artists will know the name of Singers Unlimited because they use those big, huge reel-to-reels, and that's kind of where I'm using digital technology, but I think analog.
Yeah.
So there's a certain, in fact, I've got a phrase that I'm coining now with the rise of AI. I call it organic a cappella because I am using digital products, but there's a certain line that I'm not going to cross.
Right.
And
like running a vocal through a vocoder.
Yeah. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's just
but
that's not who I am.
Organic a cappella,
it wouldn't count.
That would be a line.
Exactly. You're Jacob Collier, who's just a genius.
Yeah.
I mean, I love the stuff that he does. I could never do 2/3 of the stuff that he does because he's just another freak of nature, and that's a compliment. I don't know if these days that's considered a compliment or not, but he's just crazy amazing. His arrangement of the Flintstones. Have you ever heard that?
I have.
That's just
he is. I went through like a 2-3 week phase. I just did a deep research dive.
You were binging
into Jacob and just a story. I listened to the documentaries, the podcast, and I was just, it's fascinating.
Yeah, and his whole concept of like, what does he call it? Negative theory or negative
harmony.
Negative harmony. I mean, I still don't know that I understand it. I get what he's saying, but that's beyond me. And I stand on the shoulders of the people that went before me. Even on the, I grew up in a musically conservative house, and still compared to the Christian world at large, I'm still on the conservative side, and we're welcome to talk about that. No holds barred.
Sure.
So my dad, I would sit down with my dad, and my dad would go through music with me. My dad was saved out of jazz and rock and stuff, so he's very sensitive about these things, and I'm grateful for the training that I got, because we would sit down with music, and I would say, Dad, I want to listen to this group. What's allowed and what's not? And he would say, okay, this, I'd rather you didn't, but, limit it. He was really honest with me, and then he would tell me why. And that to me made all the difference, because I'm not the exact same as my dad now. I'm not as sensitive to some of the things that he, before he was saved and was playing in nightclubs and stuff like that, he's going to be sensitive to certain things that I'm not, because I didn't associate that. Some things I think are absolute principles, and some things aren't. But he sat down and he would tell me why. So that fostered in me a desire to know why, and say, hey, there are answers to things. So my love of a cappella music, it relates to all of this, because I paid attention to the different sounds. There's a different sound and feeling to a street corner doo-wop group than Glad, which really can't do what they do live.
Yeah.
I mean, physically they couldn't. They will perform live, but they're doing it with a track.
Yeah.
And because it's physically impossible.
Yeah.
Now we've got people that are sounding like they've listened to Autotune music that's so pitch corrected and so mechanical. Their voices actually they can sing like it, which is, it's amazing that the human nature can do that. But then I'm also at the same time, I'm like, I don't know that that's good. I honestly don't know.
Because like there's a humanness to knowing how to go from note to note and like blend it.
I think so. I mean, do I want to sound like a machine? I don't think so. I mean, I know I don't.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm talking a lot here. I guess it is a podcast, but you got me rolling, brother.
No, that's awesome. No, in fact, there's a few things I want to comment on, and then you actually said something that I want to segue with. There is an absolute reality to getting older, and your skill kind of wears. And I know my dad loves classical guitar, and so, hey, Dad, thanks for listening to all my episodes.
Hey, for dads,
and so he practiced guitar growing up into college, and there's a podcast episode with him. He kind of played casually for maybe 15, 20 years. And then there came a point he said, no, I want to get serious about this again.
Yeah.
And so that would be about 50s. He got back into it, and he wrestled with, man, here I am, a 50-year-old practicing when there are 4-year-olds out there. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and things don't come back as fast, and it takes more perseverance. And now you have some carpal tunnel you have to wrestle with, which a younger person may not have had to wrestle with that. But what I've realized, though, and this is to what you said, is the wisdom that comes with age that youth doesn't have. And sometimes for someone so young to be so skilled can be very dangerous. Because it's not tempered with wisdom.
Right.
On signing record deals, on the friends you surround yourself with, on maybe the person you meet to marry. I feel like there's not enough spoken out about the blessing and a curse about gifts at a young age. And there really is a benefit to learning lessons the hard way over an extended amount of time. And then when you're older, you may not be as capable, but at the same time, the message is seasoned, and yes, you stand on the shoulders of giants, but now your shoulders are built to point other people in the right direction. And I really think that God has a place for both. Obviously, God gifts some people very young, and to the church, I think that's the whole point of the church. The whole point of the church is that you can be so skilled, but the reason you go to church is so that older people can be like, hey, you're awesome. We love you. You're fantastic, but please watch out. We don't want to see you fall off the rails.
Absolutely.
And so for you, just for the extensive career that you've had, yes, your voice might be starting to wane, but on the other hand, it seems like there's a whole nother blessing of ministry on the other side where, like you said, it could always be worse. You still have a voice.
Yeah. I love what you're saying. In fact, I do want to say this. I'm glad you and the Holy Spirit jogged my memory, because I'm not leaving music. A cappella will always have a big part of my heart. And I may, after this project is done, I may do an a cappella song a year. It's not like I'm saying goodbye to it forever, Absolutely. But there's a different technique used in solo singing than in the a cappella stuff. And the flexibility, and Dr. Ray Gibbs told this to me probably back 12 years ago. Okay. Something like that. Because he told me specifically, and I just realized this could come across the wrong way. I say this in all humility, and you'll see his prediction came true. He just said, because I asked him, I was afraid, am I doing things correctly in my a cappella singing? Am I going to hurt myself? And he said, you're doing things that most people can't do. And from what I can tell, you're doing it in such a way that you'll be able to go as long as humanly would be possible. Correct. Now, 2 years later, I lost my voice, not due to incorrect technique, but because I got acid reflux I didn't know I had, and it was burning my vocal folds. So there's a difference. And even though the Lord gave me my voice back, I had to go on vocal rest for 3 months. I mean, it was quite a thing, and my voice has never quite sounded exactly the same. So I got 90% of my voice back. There are songs that I recorded prior to that vocal injury that I can't sing the same way. I can even hit the same notes, but I'm utilizing a different mechanic because some fine muscle control or something changed just in the course of 5 or 6 months in there. So I am hoping and prayerfully I want this to be the case, that I'll be able to sing well into my 70s. It just won't be a cappella parts. Yeah. It'll be solo stuff. Before this, you were showing me some of the stuff you're writing. I want to get back into the digital orchestration world and write more music that'll be, melodic and harmonic, but won't rely on only this.
Right.
Right. But thank you for bringing that up. My dad, we talk about our dads. My dad was a professional saxophonist, and we just did an album with him a year and a half, 2 years ago. We recorded it, and he got himself back into the best shape I have heard. But he waited. He had carpal tunnel surgery after it, and he was in pain a lot of times playing. But I know what you're talking about. Your dad working, and he's 50 years old, and then here's this kid that's 6 years old, and they're doing these crazy things.
Yeah.
What a world we live in.
I know. I mean, especially with social media, it's interesting. Two parallel thoughts came to mind. It's crazy because with social media, it's so much more accessible to see how insanely good people can be.
Yeah.
And then I heard a quote, I think yesterday, we compare our behind the scenes with other people's highlight reel.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, right?
That's good.
Because it's like I do a practice routine every day, and like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm going up the scale and I'm going down the scale, and oh, well, I need to make this fine adjustment. And then you pull up Instagram.
Yeah. There's somebody.
Right? So it's, oh man. And God had to bring me to the place, I think 3-4 months ago. This was a really big thing for me where I had to really go to God and accept, like officially write a letter to myself and accept I'm exactly where God wants me to be in life. Like I didn't miss a train. I didn't make some crazy mistake. I'm not at fault for anything that maybe went wrong. I'm exactly where God wants me to be. Treat myself like it. Like, don't beat myself up over the Instagram reel or anything. It's like, and this was in the same season I was actually researching Jacob Collier, because, and he's not a Christian, and it gets a little wild once you go into, okay, what does he believe? Like any other secular musician, I guess.
Yeah.
But just his philosophy, and this is a great segue because I wanted to talk philosophy with you.
Sure.
But he had so many good thoughts on just humility. And like someone's asked him, oh, how do you feel about being labeled as a genius? And he's like, it's offensive, man. I mean, yeah, I mean, and I've been called it my whole life. Like when I was 6 years old, it was, oh, there's Jacob the genius. But when you come to me and call me a genius, now you've put me on a pedestal and I can't connect with you. Like, I just want to talk with you like man to man, human being. You know, like if you're learning an instrument, like, yeah, let's talk chords. You don't need to know what I know. I don't need to know what you know.
That's
like,
great.
Let's just talk chords. And there's also some amazing videos. He has a live stream he does sometimes. And at one point he got on a live stream with like a 5-year-old, and it's really cute. And the 5-year-old's like, oh, what's your favorite chord? And he's like, oh, well, lately it's been this. And, well, what's your favorite chord? And the kid's like, oh, like I like a G7. And it's like
great.
it's like the cutest thing. And it's in a really, it was one of the pieces along with the Bible and the Holy Spirit, to say, hey, like, why do you need to be the best? And to what I was telling you, it's like, what's wrong with accepting the fact that my prime may be when I'm 45?
Mm-hmm.
And okay, there's a 15-year journey between now and 45, but okay, now you have breathing room. And one thing that Jacob Collier said was that the hustle is kind of a joke because, okay, if you have this huge dream you're pushing for and then you achieve it, well, then what? Like, is there another thing to hustle for? Because you're just going to ruin a lot of relationships along the way. And it's like, it's not worth it compared to just enjoying your craft and just exploring it. And so with that, I want to go back to that eventually, but
yeah,
I know I asked you that it'd be really cool for you to give like an overview of your music philosophy, how you approach it, your main thoughts on it. And then I kind of want to compare that to maybe some things I've been working through and just see how that goes back and forth.
Oh, absolutely.
Sure.
Well, I was thinking about this even before I walked in your house. There has to be a little bit of a preamble to my actual philosophy.
Sure. And
I'll try to keep it to like 3 sentences. There's a difference between your philosophy and your attitude about your philosophy. So, it's like, it's not original with me, but there's your position and then there's your disposition. So I think a lot of times because we're going to talk about music philosophy, there's going to be things that we're going to disagree on, I'm sure, because sometimes I don't even agree with myself. So, so there's a difference between someone's position and then their disposition about it. So I hope that I always come across, I haven't always succeeded, I'm sure, but I hope that I always come across with a spirit of grace and humility and be honest about what I think, what I know, what I think, and what I think I know. And then what things I don't. I think the biggest change that's happened is I'm not afraid to tell people when I don't know.
Yeah.
Rewind me 20 years. I didn't want to admit I didn't know anything on the subject of music philosophy because I grew up. I'll just give you a little background. My dad was saved out of jazz and rock. Praise the Lord. He didn't participate in all the immoral activities that were going on because he was a good Catholic. But after he trusted Christ and he tried mixing the genres for a little while, and that just wasn't right. He didn't feel right in his conscience, and I'm skipping a lot of things. But he ended up getting one of his master's degrees over here at Pensacola Christian College from Dr. Frank Garlock.
Yeah.
So Dr. Frank Garlock is going to be a name familiar to certain circles of Christianity, conservative Christianity, particularly in fundamentalism, which is a term I don't throw around that much because it can be misunderstood. But a very, very godly man. And I will also say a very misunderstood man. I got to know him personally because my parents became friends with he and his wife and then the Hamiltons.
It's pretty cool.
Which is an honor, right? In fact,
that's awesome.
I'll say this. When I got home from camp at 13 years old, I woke up and I had a brand new basketball hoop in my driveway that they had gotten for me and installed while I was at camp. And Patch the Pirate walked out of my back door, which is where our driveway was, right? Because they were passing through town and they knew the family, and I'm like, my parents got me Patch the Pirate for my birthday because I grew up on Patch the Pirate, right? So
funny.
So that's crazy.
I love that for you, man.
Yeah.
Man.
So that's and I don't mean it to sound like name dropping. I don't mean it. You people out there, you got people that you know and love, and you're glad to be around.
Yeah. Long
story short, I grew up in the middle of the worship wars, and is holding mics bad and is canned music wrong on cassette tape and all that. Look at the album cover. This guy's got long hair on the album cover, and I'm not saying that's what Dr. Garlock taught. I'm throwing things out that I remember. I grew up in that, and even with my friends at Christian school, we would end up taking sides. And the first message I ever preached, I was in 9th grade, and they let me preach a chapel message on subject of music. I was called to preach by the Lord the next year. I had nothing to do with that message, but I mean, this topic has been a part of my life and for so long. And then there came a point at which I was sick of the topic because of the fighting. And I was just like, man, I'm just so sick of this topic. And that's when, this was after I was married. My wife then said, well, you're probably ready to speak on it now, because my attitude about it had changed. So in a nutshell, I've worked hard at getting this down. I believe musical style equals attitude. That's my philosophy in one sentence.
Musical style equals attitude.
Right. So if you can... if you accept that, I'm not saying you have to accept that, but for example, if I can start applying it and maybe it'll make sense where I'm coming from.
Sure.
I'm trying to stop hitting your microphone. I compare musical style to tone of voice. So for instance, sarcasm. Sarcasm is saying one thing, but by tone of voice, actually changing the meaning of the words through it is verbal, but it's not the words itself.
Yeah.
It's actually an attitude.
Like, oh, that's a great thought, or, well, that's a great thought.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I would say that you said it in two different styles. Now, some people say, well, that's not really a style. Fine. That's fine. Call it attitude, call it whatever you want.
Right. Yeah.
This is just like a very basic thing. Okay. So when it comes to music, my concern is, because I do fall on the conservative side of Christian music, and we can talk about secular music, which is a whole nother deal, actually. But I never want the style or attitude with which I deliver the truth to actually combat the very truth or give a contradictory message to the words I'm saying.
Like if you have a happy message in an angry voice, did you really do the happy message a service?
Right. And some of the classic examples of people doing this are things like the Muppet Show. This is stuff I grew up on. But a great form of humor is when someone will do something like that on purpose for comedic effect. Like they'll sing a love song. And you can look this up. You know, the Electric Mayhem Band is the rock band for the Muppet Show, right? With Janice with the long blonde hair, and you've got Dr. Teeth. And he's at the organ, and you've got whatever his name was who played the saxophone, had the dark glasses, and they played an old love song from the 40s called Tenderly. And of course they did it in their Electric Mayhem style. And that's an old example that I got from my dad years ago. But I've loved it because it's hilarious, because they're playing, instead of the evening breeze caress the trees tenderly, you know, they're like the evening breeze caress the tree tenderly, you know, an animal is going crazy there. And now I'm not saying, because if you're listening, you might jump to the conclusion, because I've heard people jump, that Ben is saying that therefore it's sin. We haven't gotten to that point yet.
Okay.
I'm not saying it's sin. I'm questioning the appropriateness. So if I were to, sorry,
you're good, man.
If I were to sing about the holiness of God in a way that was in a style that would emanate pride, I know you have to decide, okay, well, what is that? What does that mean? What is it? But let's just say, if there's a style that emanates pride, I wouldn't want to sing about the holiness of God. Or better yet, in a disrespectful. Let's use the word disrespectful, because that's a little easier for sake of this discussion.
Right.
I wouldn't want to sing about the holiness of God in a disrespectful way. And I illustrate it. I hate illustrating it, but I illustrate it by imagining me preaching. If I were preaching or teaching, and I won't yell for the sake of your listeners here, but if I were to talk about God, I love God. God is so holy. Okay. I don't even like doing that.
Yeah.
Because it's the name of God, and it sounds like I'm being disrespectful. It's my belief that there are styles of music that basically do the equivalent of what I just did. That are when matched with the music of the holiness of God, they create a contradictory message. Now, I already know, because I've been doing this a while, that people are going to disagree on what those styles are and to what degree, etc. And that is where discernment comes in, and grace. Because if you can think of it as an iceberg, some of the principles of music I think are universal, and some are, what's that word when it's, objective and subjective. That's what I meant. Yeah. And then we're going to disagree about, I'm not saying you in particular, but I'm just saying people will disagree about what that is. But most people never get to that point of the argument. They can't. It's either, well, you're just traditional. Well, no, there are some hymns that I won't use because, I even try. I was sinking deep in sin, having a wonderful time till my roommate turned me in. He's no friend of mine. That's my little spiel there.
It's not really sinking.
Is it really going with those words? Now, I understand it was a different time frame, and the format of the gospel song is in such a way that they didn't think outside the box to put it in a minor key, for example, until the chorus. We can do that. Yeah. We're not limited by the gospel song box anymore, so we can move past that. So it's a little unfair I don't like going back in history. The woke crowd likes to do that, criticize previous generations for things they didn't even have the capacity to deal with. Yeah. But that is basically, instead of trying to chart this whole big music philosophy thing, I went the opposite way. And I've okay, here's one thought. Musical style is attitude. And then you start working out from there, and you see all kinds of different connections. For example, some people say we should never listen to secular music. Well, I highly disagree. Because they'll say, well, just listen to Christian music. Okay, well then where are you going to get your romantic music? We just don't listen to it ever? I had a couple, and they gave me the permission to share this. I won't, of course, it's a couple I came across in the last 20 years. So there you go.
All right, no, that's too specific.
Yeah. Well, I am so grateful they shared this with me, but they were, a new believer and then one who had been lapsed and then came back to the Lord.
Okay.
And they wanted to do what was right with music. And so they sat me and my wife down. It was us four talking. It wasn't just them and me. It was the four of us. And they said, when we're having romantic time, we have wanted to do what's right. So we listen to your music. Yes. Yeah. Right. So and they wanted to know, like, is there anything else that we can listen to? Now, I didn't laugh, praise the Lord.
Nice.
And
great job.
And I wasn't, I mean, what we said to them was we complimented them. First of all, we said, that is amazing that you feel so strongly that you want to honor the Lord.
Yeah,
that's
totally fair.
You know what I'm saying?
Like, it was a genuine decision on their part.
Exactly.
To genuinely try and do the right thing.
Right. So, and I happened to be speaking where they were around. So they said, hey, let's talk. And I said, listen, God has created things for a purpose. And when it's fulfilling that purpose, it's right. When I kiss my wife, that is a good thing, but I wouldn't do it for an offertory. There are, right?
Yeah.
So there are styles of music that I think are appropriate between a husband and wife that would not be appropriate for me to sing that way about God or in a congregation. And this is where I'll get in trouble with some of the more conservative people than me, because they would say, well, secular music, well, it's all bad because it has the word secular. Well, I don't even like using that term, but there's entertainment in music. There's entertainment in life. I don't wear a suit to go to Walmart. Now, there are some things that are just a matter of appropriateness, or some things that are wrong.
Right.
So I think of music like I would think of clothing. I think of it's appropriate to the activity. If you're working out, I've told Christian coaches this. I won't name names, but I've had Christian coaches call me up and say, hey, I'm trying to get guys to work out, and we've got, pre-game music, all this stuff. And we're using, I don't want to say too much specific now, but they're using like Christian conservative music, and it just doesn't seem to fit. And I'm like, yeah, you're absolutely right. It doesn't fit.
Yeah.
You need to play something that will be appropriate for physical activity.
Yeah.
So,
I tried that once. I went through a short season where I was trying to pull in the reins a bit, and I went to the gym with classical music.
Yeah.
And 10 minutes in, I was like, no, this is not making me want to get some gains.
Right, exactly. Right.
I tried.
Right. So, for example, and I wouldn't say this publicly for years. I'm okay with saying it now. And because people have already blackballed me and, won't have me in their Christian college because, I'm a compromiser or whatever. But you want to listen to the soundtrack to Rocky when you're working out, that's what it's for. Now, I'm just going to tell you, I'm not going to use the soundtrack to Rocky or something similar to sing about the holiness of God. I don't think that they match. You know what I'm saying? So, and I've taught my kids the why. So even if they end up being more conservative than me or less conservative than me, we're after the same thing, which is appropriateness and honoring who the Lord is. So I could probably say a lot more. Hopefully that makes some sense.
Yeah.
And I'll catch heat for it. I could start naming colleges. I found out I had a guy write me. He said, hey, I love your music. Appreciate it. How does it feel to be a gateway drug? And I said, I wrote him back. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, at the Christian college I went to, it's not PCC. I have a great relationship with PCC. And if there's any college on the face of the earth that I line up the most with, it's actually PCC in a lot of areas, including music. We're not identical, but I do want to say that because some people think, well, it's not. But there's a Christian college out there, and they said you can't listen to Ben Everson's music because it's a gateway drug and it'll get you into all kinds of other stuff. And I said, oh, well, first of all, I didn't know that I was considered that. And then why? Why do they consider me that? And they said, well, your a cappella stuff is too risky. And what they mean by that is people don't know how to categorize it. Because I'm going like do and ba da da and all that stuff. And like, well, that who does that and where does that come from and all that type of stuff. So there's a kind of a strain that has followed that, and I don't mean to make this about about this, but it's enlightening to me because it's actually giving me more freedom, because I don't have to, the fear of man bringeth a snare. And sometimes I have been afraid to step out and say what I really think, how I see the principle connecting, because, hey, I'm a human. I don't want to lose a church.
Yeah.
I don't want to hurt people. My goal is to be out there encouraging people. So there are some churches I'm not going to be a good fit at on the conservative side of things, because they're just conservative because we want to be conservative.
Yeah.
That's why I am not the most conservative guy. I'm on that side. If you had to pick sides, I'm definitely on that side.
Yeah.
But I will listen to entertainment music. I actually probably listen 60% to non-Christian music and 40% Christian music. But if you look at my life, well, how much of it's not a direct comparison, because our whole life should glorify God. Yes, but we still go to Walmart or Publix, or, you work out, or you take a shower, or you watch at least I hope y'all do, right? You watch a movie. Is it only Christian movies that y'all watch? Yeah. I mean, some people are like that. And we just have a very different interpretation of philosophy and such. But I see it all as connecting, because a lot of times we want to put music in the corner. Like I actually had a professor of a different Christian college. He didn't say it was this way, but he said, I wonder if music was supposed to be reserved only for worship. Like it should never be. He was wondering, should it ever even be used for entertainment? And I started going through in my mind, just times when I was thinking of Israel, and they had times when they were joyous. Now it's hard because it was a theocracy and like everything they did, it's not like we live today. So, it
was very different,
really different. In fact, more. Anyway, I did a bunch of paragraphs, brother. But is that enough to get your brain flowing?
Oh my word, yeah. There's so much there.
Here we go.
There's so much there.
That's great.
One of the thoughts that was developing in my mind as you were talking about a lot of that, and just to restate it for my own memory. So you said, music style is attitude. That's a thought.
Good memory.
Yeah. The idea that music is a very real language. Like we use English. I'm learning Japanese casually on the side. Okay. So like Duolingo.
There you go.
Follow me. But anyways, music is a language. And that being said, you can use it to say different things in different ways. And so, let's just use English again. And I'm basically restating your point, but it's like, if music is a language, it's like I'm known for as the type of person that just declares basic ideas, just basic facts. Hey, the sky's blue today. Hey, there's this. And then someone can be like, oh, you're the type of person that just happily asks or happily says, oh, the sky is blue today. Like, oh yeah, you communicate those types of things. But you can also be the type of person to wake up and be like, what's the meaning of life? Like what like in a somber, real thought of where am I at in life? Have you thought about this? And so it's two very different modes of thinking, but it's you're capable of both. And so I think that's comforting to me, because for me, I'll wiggle my way through genres, and then sometimes I'll write a song, just a one-shot song, and a friend's like, okay, so is it orchestra? Is it electronic? Are you going heavier? What are you? And the beauty is that you can do that. You're not sinning at that point. It's just, it shows the variety of the language. It's the variety of the language. One of the, you made the point, you can say something, but it's the way you say it that matters. The holiness of God. You're not going to be oh, God's just so holy. It's that doesn't make sense. I think one concern I've noticed is in the generation that we live in is we live in an era that's about self-expression. Let's go back to Jacob Collier. Jacob's philosophy is listen, man, this is just who I am. I wake up, I can't be anything other than me. You can like it, you can hate it. I totally respect that, man. But this is just what I do. This is what I make. And when people talk about my harmonies, my rhythms, they intellectualize it. But for me, it's a real living experience. Like, I lived that emotion just comes out in harmonies. That's just what happens. And so it's like, I would look at that and say, okay, like the message and the attitude, they line up. Now, what I've noticed, however, in Christian music, even modern Christian music, is for a lot of it, it lines up. The problem is the message is downer and the attitude comes across as downer. And okay, like, I guess the theology is right, but is this really pointing me back to God? Or it's like, oh, the message is really solid, but you're coming across downer. Or it's like, oh yeah, there's kind of hope, and wow, God just came through for me. Praise the Lord, amen. End of story. And it's like maybe too casual, like not too much so, but enough that I don't question the music so much as I start to wonder about the person behind the music. And I'm thinking, man, is their walk with God really okay?
Yeah.
Are they growing? Months ago, this was like the second or third episode, I had a friend named Malachi. We were talking about an artist named NF. He's a Christian rapper. I don't know if you've heard of him.
No.
Totally fine. But like the branding is just very dark. If you pull up social media, you pull up Spotify, it's just very black and low grays, and like that's just the brand. And the songs are very authentic. And if he's mad about something that maybe is genuine reason to be mad about, so he raps about it. Okay. And then there's a song that is about the hope of God, but okay, if I'm still wrestling through all my flaws. And I made the point to my friend, I'm like, okay, when's the album where I really taste the victory? And so I feel like when it comes to music and the debates over music, we lose sight of the state of our Christian nation and world for the object of music. Like start arguing over the music when it's really like, man, what's the state of the church? Like, how did we get to where we are?
Mm-hmm.
Or I was talking with someone today about, it seems like a lot of Christian music is more broad, in partiality because you want to be able to go viral. Yeah. Like it's a huge thing nowadays of when's my Instagram or YouTube or TikTok going to really hit the algorithm?
Right.
When am I going to release that song that's going to be remixed in all the reels?
Yep. Because
then, and this is the other part of it, then I can better feed my family. So it's like, that's another part of it too. It's not just, oh, I want to worship God just to worship God, and that may be the heart of it. That may be. But if the classic internet trope or trend where you quit your day job to pursue your passion, and okay, you do that, and okay, want to stay true and put out pure theology, but also, man, the algorithm and my kids' college,
right?
It's it's such a weird world that we live in now, where I personally haven't heard the music philosophy talked about as much, and yet it's become more complex. And so with, going viral, let's go back to being genuine and authentic. Okay, you want to connect with people. Where's the line between connecting with people and connecting with God? Because it's like, man, I want to write a song that's genuine and relatable, and someone hears it and like it just hits them. Okay, but God, also, what do you want me to write? And like, I want to be true to your word. And there's very few artists that I find that are able to somehow ride that line. It's really difficult. And I say all of that not really having so much answers, but it's sobering for me to take a step back And when it comes to the philosophy of it, it's like, okay, style wise, my mind just completely blanked. I had this huge train of thought.
Oh, I mean, you already got my brain working on
Yeah,
all the
like
other stuff.
what are some of your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, and we can help each other here too, because, I mean, it's going to sound a little out there at first, but hopefully I can bring it home here. The attention span of people is getting shorter and shorter and shorter.
Yeah, absolutely.
It used to be when you released music. Yeah, some people would do singles back in the day, but usually it was on an LP. And there was a progress of thought, at least, or
a coherent narrative. Almost.
Yeah, thank you. That's much better put, right? No, I understand. In the pop world, you'd get like a 45, and there'd be an A side and a B side. I know that.
Yep.
But we've gotten to the point now where there's such a short attention span, whether it be listening to a sermon or listening to music or whatever, that we want everything to be solved so quickly. Well, I hate being asked a big theological question right before I preach, right before the service in the aisle. And then I have to give the person like 2 or 3 sentences because church is starting. And I know that's not a good, like, I'm going to give them truth, but it's not going to be, there's a minimum threshold of time. There's a minimum threshold of number of words that it takes to express the gospel. Yeah, well, maybe it's just love. Is it really? Is that you got to have more than that? Gospel is not just love. You got to have justice in there. You got to have holiness in there. You got to have, sin.
Yeah.
Right. There is a minimum. I don't know. I'm not saying I know what the minimum is, but you keep getting shorter and shorter. So when you talk in music, which is even less concrete, there's a minimum threshold at which you can express a certain amount of truth. So Patch the Pirate, to go back to him, was very conservative, but he had a gift with expressing truth to kids in a very small package. And how he did that was he made sure to keep that song very focused. So as you were talking, I'm thinking of some of the songs that I really don't want to name because I'm probably going to be some people's favorite songs because these are some of the top 20, Christian songs that are sung in every church. They're really generic. And they talk about rain, and you've probably seen the YouTube more water references. You know what I'm talking about? I think it's an old John Christ one. Oh man, that is so. There's that one, and then there was another one that was out by Random Action Verb. If you look up Random Action Verb Worship or something like that.
Oh my word!
It's so formulaic, right?
Yeah.
Well, so that's one thought. And then the other thought I'm going to match with it is I think it was in Carrie Schmidt's book. I'm trying to give him credit if it was him. It was either in his book. I don't know if you're familiar with Carrie Schmidt.
Yeah.
Great writer. He just does so well writing on the page. But he went through cancer and different things, and Lord brought him out. But he said something in either one of his chapters or a blog post or something where he said, beware of being too public or writing too much about a trial when you're in the middle of it. Wait until God's brought you through, and then go write about it. Now, he wasn't saying, and I wouldn't say, that you can't ever express yourself, especially to those people who are close to you when you're going through a trial. Absolutely. But he was more pointing out publicly, because in Psalms, and this is my thought that goes along with that, when the psalmist, it's not a David psalm, but is it Psalm 80? No, that's on Revival. I'm forgetting which psalm it was right now because I'm tired. But when he says, when he's frustrated, maybe it's Psalm 73, when he's frustrated at the wicked, right? And it's not until I went into the sanctuary, then understood I their end, right? So in other words, if you were to stop the psalm halfway through, you have an incomplete message. And I think if I'm gathering correctly, that's along the same lines of what you were saying.
Yeah.
Some of these, whether it was the rap artist, he's probably sincere, I'm sure, and wants to express something, but you were looking for, okay, well, where's the upward look?
Yeah.
Where's the rest of the story?
Yeah.
Because we don't want to stay down here. So where's the rest of it? And so those are the thoughts that I thought were relevant. When it comes to that.
Yeah. No, that's really good. I'm glad you brought up the Psalms because this has come up in other conversations. I find that the Psalms are an interesting template to the variety of messages that can be said through music.
Wow.
Because the Psalms, I mean, where David is talking about war,
Right.
and he's talking about war like it's a good thing.
Hmm.
And like, no, God, you give this victory and it's a powerful thing. And then there's other victories that's like, wow, I barely made it out alive. And
Yeah.
and then there's other versions that are like, I'm just surrounded.
Right.
I'm just surrounded. And I think someone pointed out that a lot of the Psalms usually come back to God.
Right.
And the length of that can vary. Sometimes it's just one verse. But it's like, but I look to God in his face, but his voice, but his presence, but, and so like there is that short upward look. And even, you could even go to Ecclesiastes, because the whole book of Ecclesiastes is, man, I wasted away everything. Okay,
Right.
let's look at the bottom line. Fear God, keep his commandments. End of story.
Right.
Yeah, and you also have that wisdom of growing older too. Because, I mean, Solomon, one really interesting thing about Solomon, and this is a tangent, Solomon asked God for the discernment of good and evil and wisdom. And the more I've pondered it, I really think it took him throwing away his life to really achieve that wisdom you wouldn't get otherwise. Which... it's more of an allowance on God's part, where God just allowed him to disobey. God didn't
Right.
push him in that direction. But it's like the wisdom to be able to say, I had all the wisdom for everything. And it was a slide. I point out to someone, Solomon, it took him 13 years to build his house, 7 years for the temple. And then the queen of Sheba came, and then the wives. So there is at least 10 years where he wasn't messing up his life.
Right.
Where he was wise. And then he's throwing away his life, and then you get to the end, and okay, here's the gold wisdom.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, let's take this to music. There's a place for all kinds of different messages of like, if someone's giving their testimony about like an abuse story or a trial. And typically, this is weird as I think of it, typically people give testimonies behind the mic after they're out of it.
Right.
Like, as I think about it, it's rare that
Right.
someone gets behind the mic at a church as they're like midway through a trial, like, hey, we're dying.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
And sometimes there might even be a place for that, because
Yeah, absolutely.
how else is the church going to be able to know
Right.
that they need help, that they
Right.
need prayer, that they need support? So like, that's why I find music is such a complex issue at the heart. A bit of my testimony, I guess, when I was in high school, I was very much so into heavy rock and rap. There's a lot of grunge, indie bands. And then I traveled with the Academy of Arts in South Carolina.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I traveled with
Wow.
them for 2 summers.
That's amazing.
So the Chavers, the Strattons.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they had a huge impact on my life, because here's what happened. Nicole Stratton gave a music philosophy talk. It lasted like 2 hours. And I walked out of that room very torn, because she taught a lot of the things that you're saying, and like very passionately. And so then I went away for the summer, and the team had very strict rules on the music you could listen to.
Yeah.
It was very much so like conservative music.
Oh yeah.
Okay, maybe some Disney songs here and there, fun stuff. And I got back, and I turned on the music I would normally listen to, and I just felt really horrible about myself. It was weird, and
Yeah.
it was just like my conscience hurt, and I called up one of the staff members, and I said, hey, can I talk this through with you? Because like, I don't feel right about it, and here's some other problems going on in life. And God convicted me to just give all that music up. It was interesting, because I had actually been struggling with a lot of anger problems in that season, like with my parents and my brothers. It was very deep seated. And it wasn't until I gave up that music that God took that away.
Wow.
It was really weird. And so that was very sanctifying time in my life. And as the years went on, like I tried to listen to some conservative stuff, But like some, I do electronic music. I like electronic music. There were just some songs that were just a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
And like, then I had to wrestle back through, how is it that this music that was honestly preached so heavily against, like, honestly puts me at ease. Like it really is something that it encourages me. I appreciate it. It's like, at this point, it's like in my blood. It's just, I really enjoy that. And so then years went on. It was kind of finding, going back and forth and finding that middle ground. Like I was telling you before the podcast, like I go through phases where I'm really interested in certain pop artists and stylistically what they do and like structure and production techniques.
Right.
And then after like a month, I'm like, okay,
yeah,
I should really pull the reins in. Like, what's going on with some other, genres that are more restrained or whatever. So, follow that up to my deep research on Jacob Collier, who, I mean, he was classically trained and then he went into a lot of jazz and now he just combines everything.
Right.
It's really wild. And so to hear his philosophy of like, man, just sit down and make something cool and like, just reach inside your tool belt and make something. And then I really took that and started thinking, man, when I reach into my tool belt, like I have all these tools that I love and I believe it passed through my conscience with God. And yeah, it may not be what, some conservative circles may follow, but I have to go back through, okay, what's my walk with God? And so at this point, it's taking that and also realizing Jacob's not a Christian. So like, you gotta be so careful on, okay, the Holy Spirit isn't here. I'm just amazed that God lets some human beings, though not Christian, have an uplifting spirit. Right. And like from all appearances exhibit a genuine humility that ironically enough sometimes you don't find in Christians.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Crazy, man.
That I don't mean to interrupt.
No, you're good.
But that when you first said we're talking about Jacob Collier, and then you remember I said my preamble, right? Your disposition about your position.
Yeah.
These people like Peter Hollins is a big influence.
Yeah, a cappella.
Modern, right?
Yep.
And I jokingly say that I almost quit a cappella when I discovered Peter Hollins because I'm like, here's a guy that's almost identical to what I'm doing, and he's better than me. And, we want to have an excellent spirit about us. That means doing things to the best of our ability, not to the best of someone else's ability. So I didn't leave a cappella, but
Yeah.
I got to be part of a training program. He put out a teaching thing, and I was a beta tester. So I was one of 100 that he picked. And I was able to see a little bit more behind the scenes and his spirit and his humility and everything. And as a result of this is back in like 2016 or 17, something like that. No, I like to think that I had a humble spirit before that, but God's always deepening us, right? Well, then I was like, these people in the music circles, secular music circles, particularly in a cappella, there's a whole lot of problems that are going on when it's all about, hey, just express who you are. We know that. But what they get right, or at least what they're trying to get right, is loving other people. And I know the preacher in me and, us as Bible believers, we want to jump and say, yeah, but the love's misguided. And, what about, perversion and all that stuff. I understand. That's totally true. But what I'm picking up from that a cappella world is it doesn't matter what you look like, what handicap you have, what your orientation is. I mean, that's what they're going to say, right? We're going to love you and accept you. Now, there is part of that we need a whole lot more of in our Christian circles. I'm not talking about saying I'm going to love you and leave you where you are. Because that Jesus doesn't do that. He loves us where we are, but he doesn't. And because of the blood of Christ, we're accepted, not because of just who I am. And when you're talking about Jacob Collier, it relates to this because the unsaved world doesn't have the template that there is a such thing as sin. Or sin would be to just make someone else feel bad. That's their definition of sin, right? They don't have the idea of original creation and the fall. So when someone says express what is inside you, just be who you are, okay, it's more than that for the Christian. It's not just be who you are, but be who you are in Christ. So when we add that, it's not that Collier is wrong. I love what you said about him. It makes me respect him even more. But for the Christian musician, it's not just be who you are, it's be who you are in Christ. So Collier is incomplete. These other people out there that have the wonderful attitude that I also want to have. I want to have humility. I want to have a spirit of collaboration. I want to have that feeling about me. I don't know. People give feelings when they walk into a room. You can just pick it up,
Yeah.
I want to have that approachableness. Jesus had that because kids wanted to be around him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So express who you are, but in Christ. Even some of the guys that I would agree with, your Bob Coughlin's, I would agree with, we're not 100% alike on doctrine anyway, but I mean, he is, he loves the Lord. He wants to honor the Lord in what he does, but he's written. That's why I'm picking on him a little bit, because he's written some great stuff. Yeah. Harold Best is another one that's written some amazing things. But what these guys and guys like them leave out when it comes to them saying any music is viable for a Christian message, what they're leaving out is they don't deal with the impact of the fall on creation. Because they'll go on and on about, especially Harold Best, he'll go on and on about God is a God of variety. And so variety should be reflected in our music. And he's right. Yeah. But then but cancer is part of our world now. God didn't create cancer. There's weeds. There's corruption. There's
death. A variety to the other side of the coin.
Exactly. Too. So to kind of come around full circle to that, and this I know, well, what's people's definition of beauty? Ultimately, the definition of beauty is how God defines it. So we got to find out, because it all comes back to our view of God. How do we understand God? Well, what is beautiful? In God's eyes, a man and a woman coming together in marriage is beauty. It's not a man and a man. It's not a man and two women or vice versa or whatever. His definition, that he does have definitions of beauty. So when we're writing the soundtrack of life for other people, as you're sitting down and working, that's really what you're doing. You're providing the soundtrack for your life, sure, but certainly your wife's life, and then some of the projects that you're working on, and then even your work that you're doing in the studio. You're producing a soundtrack for other people's lives. Now, they can misuse it, sure, but what you're trying to do and what I'm trying to do and other people like us, even if we're not identical, is we're trying to reflect beauty as God defines it. So we can love someone like Jacob Collier or others. We keep saying his name, but there are plenty others like him. Yeah. As they're reflecting. One of my favorite groups to listen to, a lot of their older stuff, was a group called the Swingle Singers.
I've never heard of them.
Oh, you need to check them out. They were started back in the 60s by a guy by the name of Ward Swingle, who lived in Mobile. And they were the pioneers they took Bach, particularly Bach, but they took a little bit of some of the other classics, and they would vocalize it almost a cappella. Sometimes they would have like a bass line, and they would just vocalize, and they kind of jazzed it a little bit. So your purists, if you didn't like Gershwin, Rhapsody in Blue, you're not going to like Swingle Singers, but they were I thought it was beautiful music. They were taking classical music and doing it in a very accessible way. And that's just one. They're much more modern now. They do some of their older stuff, but they've kind of gone more of the pentatonics route. Yeah. But anyway, now I'm the one forgetting where I was headed on my journey here on talking.
No, you're good.
But I love talking about these things.
Yeah. So I mean, man, if we want to park on beauty, yes, there's what God would define as beautiful in His Word. And I mean, you could even go into the Song of Solomon, right? I mean, it's just it's a beautiful book. And there's also things in Proverbs that like, this is right, this is good, this is not good, and this is not good. And I think going back to Ecclesiastes, He hath made everything beautiful in its time. There's a time to weep, a time to laugh.
So you don't play circus music at the funeral.
Exactly. Yeah.
Unless he was part of the circus.
Yeah. Oh my word. And I mean, and on the flip side too, step outside the word, just look at nature and how nature, though fallen, the architecture is so beautiful and organized, but the variety is off the charts. I mean, take the eye of a lizard and compare it to a snowflake, right? Like it's just they're so different, and also there's no snowflake that's the same.
Right.
And you get these microscopic things of snowflakes. And I don't know, going back to electronic music, there's certain elements that it's like almost hyper organized in a lot of ways, depending on like where you lean into it. But synthesizers allow for a nuance of tone on a technical basis that it's so much more difficult to get with a live instrument. Like a violin secludes you to the sound of a violin.
Right.
A cello, vice versa, and so on and so forth, the human voice. But, you go into the world of synthesis and additive and subtractive, and it's like for a subtractive synthesizer, you shape the sound by taking out frequencies. Additive, you shape the sound by adding in frequencies. And like it's all playing with the architecture that God's given. And so that's just how I viewed electronic music as a whole. Is it's just a whole different mode of organizing music on like a technical analytic basis. But yeah, just like the variety of beauty. But the other thought that I had was also how the knowledge of beauty can also come with time and skill. Because take a violinist trying to learn and it's not beautiful for a couple of years. It's not beautiful. They can't do it. But with the experience, they understand the why of everything. Oh man, I saw an ad. This is funny. I saw an ad for an Adobe Photoshop course today, actually. And one of the pain points of the ad was, yeah, you can learn on your own, but you get a lot of bad habits by lack of experience. And so if you take this course, that'll only get you so far. There comes a point when there are principles you have to adhere to what resonates with people on skill. So like you expressing yourself will only take you so far.
Yes.
As you think your skill will take you. And then someone's going to wonder, okay, but can he actually hit 2 notes spot on?
Yes.
They're wondering, but can you do that?
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up because it brought up a rush of memories for me. There have been times, I'm not going to get too specific, but there have been times when because of how I do things and such, I have been looked at a little bit suspiciously by your, not so much anymore, but boy, how do I say this without being too specific? So I went to Bible college, and this Bible college doesn't exist anymore. But I would form groups on my own, and I would write arrangements for them. And some of the faculty, music faculty, who were friends of mine, mentors of mine, friends in an appropriate sense, like they were older than me, obviously, and such, but they were still older brothers in Christ.
Yeah.
But then when it came time to approve or not approve what Everson was doing, well, it was hard for them because they kind of looked at me a little bit lone wolf because I wasn't on staff. I was still a student, but yet clearly I'm showing promise. And so they wanted to encourage me, but they were a little nervous about because I'm experimenting with some really thick harmonic stuff that they didn't have rules for. So it wasn't like, oh, it has a beat in it. I mean, my thing is harmony. That's where I like to play around. So they would get kind of, how did he really learn his stuff? Like, can he really
where did
sing?
It come from?
Yeah. Is he legit? Did he really study? Well, he's not, is he classically trained? Is it, these questions were going on their minds. So when you were saying it'll only take you so far, I am so grateful. And I would encourage anyone who is tempted to say, I don't want to take piano lessons because I just want to play by ear. Okay, well, that'll get you so far. But then you're going to sit down and you're going to have sheet music put in front of you. You're not going to be able to play it. And you're going to wish you could. Or there's certain rules in theory that you need to learn them so that you can break them later. And you can't just start off by breaking them, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
You need to learn it.
Yeah.
Well, never use parallel fifths. Well, you learn that in early theory, but then later on, you find out, well, actually you can.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like, yes, learn the rules so you know when to break them.
Yeah.
But also, yeah, if you're the type where you want to break the rules all the time, okay, now you're learning so you can know when not to break them.
Good. Hey. Yeah.
Because it's like typically they're there for a reason. And if you know your why, eventually you'll hit a wall and you realize, this rule actually is the best decision
Right.
for what I'm trying to go for.
Yeah. Really, I shouldn't drive the wrong way up this one-way street. It actually is there for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dr. Mani Budal, who was a longtime music professor extraordinaire at Maranatha Baptist University. I went there for a couple of years as well. I went to several different places, but he told me something in private conversation that stuck with me, because I was starting to get into arranging some out of the box stuff. He just said, just remember, and he was very kind. He wasn't being mean at all. He said, just because musically you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. Because he was talking about, because I was introducing all kinds of thick chords and stuff, but it was just because I loved it. And so, and he was his point was, well, what's your purpose? Are you just stretching yourself? Hey, that's great.
Yeah.
But is this actually meant to be a blessing to someone? Well, then they got to find the melody. And that is a biblical principle. I mean, there's not a ton of straight up musical principles that we can apply directly from scripture to theory.
Yeah.
It takes an extra step, and that's not compromise. We do that in all areas of our life, folks, right? Okay. As I get shot at, not by you, but just,
that's so funny.
Because that's where nothing applies. That's not true either. But the Bible does talk about singing and making melody in your heart to the Lord. The melody is important because it carries the words and it carries the message. So if I over harmonize, because we a lot of times it's all about the rhythm, like, oh, what rhythms are sinful and what the rhythms aren't. It's about context, where they're used, how they're used, et cetera, et cetera. It's not, it's too much rhythm. For what? For working out? For a chase scene through the forest? I mean, okay. Anyway,
yeah.
I can over harmonize and obscure the melody, and now a person can't find the melody and they don't know, they can't be blessed. Now it might bless another musician. So there are some songs and arrangements that I will either write, or sometimes my dad will write for me. I'm very limited on who I will do arrangements by. But sometimes on every a cappella album that I've done, there's one arrangement on there that's for the music people. And I don't intend it to actually minister a ton to the person who's in first grade in music. It's not an insult.
Yeah.
But it's specifically designed. One example is on the Acapella 5, the one you're listening to, is my dad's arrangement, and I loved how he did it on working. God moves in mysterious ways. And I wanted my dad to pull out the stops on a 6-part multi, the melodies going all the way through and all that. And
I noticed that.
It'll confuse some people, and some people won't like it. And that's okay. Because I didn't do a whole CD of it, but that one specifically I wanted to do, and the way that my dad did it is specifically for musicians who will know what's going on.
I enjoyed it.
Good. Well, that makes sense.
That one stuck out to me just on, it seemed very rhythmically challenging. Like, I mean, it was hard. Like, I was listening to it like, man, he must be really good at rhythms, because I'm envisioning you with the mic waiting just to like get in there just at the right time.
Yeah. And when I shoot music videos of those, I hope people don't think this is a bad thing, but when I shoot music videos of songs like that, you're not really seeing the real recording session.
Yeah.
Because it would be 80 takes. It would be because I'm getting this one measure and I have to do this one measure and I can't get it. But for the musicians out there, that's why Holy, Holy, Holy is another one that would be on a prior album. I think it's on, I can't remember which. Oh, that's not on an a cappella album. That's on the Rest album. And there is a video for that. So if you look on YouTube channel, that would be something similar where he was trying to express the holiness of God and creativity at the same time. But anyway, I don't want to get too much in the weeds there, but
you're totally fine.
I love it.
Something I wanted to say, kind of as a wrap up, just for how this has been meaningful to me. There's no way that you would remember this. When I was a junior in college, you were coming to preach on music philosophy just for that day. And I was originally scheduled to pray before the service like 2 weeks at a time, but then they rescheduled me. And so I prayed specifically before that service or before that chapel. And then I had to go out because they were taking photos for the yearbook. And I came back in halfway through. But I remember sitting in that chapel like, man, this is so cool that I got to pray before this.
That's cool.
Yeah. And so I don't know, the topic's always been close to my heart.
Yeah,
I just,
absolutely.
It's never ending. And I mean, honestly, music philosophy goes as deep as I'd say just philosophy in general,
right.
and just the intellect and just the complexity of humanity. Because humans are complex and the scriptures are not. Like, there's some things in scripture that are simple and there's other things that are just not simple. Right. And the Bible doesn't shy away from that. It's like, yeah, this is hard to figure out, but it's okay. But so for anyone listening, if they just Google Ben Everson, go to Spotify, YouTube, you just come up.
Yeah, I do. Every once in a while, a soccer player by my same name comes up, but not very often. The safest place to go is my name at beneverson.com.
Sure.
And that'll I got Spotify links. I've got a store on there. I just started, I'm always starting projects and such. You can get up to speed on the 50 by 50 project.
Cool.
There, if you're interested, because I have a Patreon.
Love that.
So people can help me financially in that. And you can get on I've got a bunch of free stuff. And so if you click, if you want a free set of voice lessons, you can sign up there and I'll send you 8 free video voice lessons.
It's pretty cool.
I have a thing called Organic Acapella. If you click on it, it'll actually take you through. I send videos to you about how I do my acapella stuff. And it's not on any album. It doesn't exist anywhere except for there, and it's free. So,
beneverson.com.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being on this podcast. This was awesome, man.
Yeah. Hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, guys. I'll catch you on the next episode. Bye.